I'm back in Bowland today, learning a little more of the area. In the last video I headed over to Fair Fell, whereas today I'm on the other side of the Trough of Bowland, heading up to Wolfhole Crag. Honestly, some of these place names really make me laugh. Occasionally I look up the places that I hike online before I head out to make sure that I don't miss anything. Small landmarks or details that could be overlooked. I make sure to note them down and check them out. On that note, at the time of recording, Wolfhole's Wikipedia page begins, Wolfhole Crag is a lonely and seldom visited hill in the Forest of Bowland in Lancashire. It's also noted that it's quite possible to not see another human being all day. The East Crag apparently has a wolf hole at the base, which I guess explains the name. And at this point, I'm walking down the Wyre Way, so that's the Pennine Way, the Lancashire Way, and the Wyre Way that I've hiked on this month. And as you can see, the Wyre Way isn't as well laid out as the Pennine Way, that's for sure. But there are stones to mark the track as you go, so navigation at this point is pretty easy. And as odd as a Wikipedia entry as Wolfhole Crag has, it did turn out to be accurate. I didn't see another person the whole day. Not even in the distance on the other fells on this side of the Trough. Complete solitude. It wasn't until I was within 50 yards of the Trough that I finally passed someone. After about 6 hours of hiking and around 17 kilometres covered. You can see here that I did set out very early in the morning, so maybe that explains it a little bit. I hit the trailhead at about 6:30 AM, but I was out here for the whole morning and I didn't see anyone else. At this stage, I did pass a lot of sheep though, but up on the fell itself, there wasn't even many animals. It's really bleak out there. I caught the sunrise though, just as I was making the start of this gravel track, and my gosh does this track go on for miles. It's got some good views, but it is just a gravel track for quite a while. I passed a sign up here though that read, "You're not supposed to pick up unexploded ordnance or snakes if you see them." I didn't see any snakes. In fact, the truth be told, I've never seen a snake out here on one of these hikes. I was wondering for quite a while what on earth UXO would be doing out here. It didn't exactly seem like a prime target during a major conflict, but it wasn't long until I passed something which might explain it. Shotgun shells. I passed just a few spent shells on the ground, so I imagine if you're up here for a while looking around, you'd find quite a few. The main part of the ascent is up this track, so at least the ground is good and navigation is easy as you gain elevation. Eventually you do leave the gravel track, turning into what seems at the time like the wild, but trust me, it's going to get worse, with this track devolving from a wide gravel track to a faint path through the grass, but eventually it will become essentially unmarked ground. Even so, the climb to Wolfhole is relatively easy, as the route takes you alongside a stone wall the whole way to the trick point. There's also a plane crash site up here. An Avro Anson crashed here in 1944, and there's still a little bit of crashed debris in this area if you're interested in that kind of thing. This area is also access land. I'm not an expert on access land, so I'm not going to go too much into the details there, but my understanding is that under most circumstances, this gives you the right to roam here. So you'll be seeing me leave the marked tracks altogether to make a circular route through open moors back to the Trough of Bowland. Access land is land you're able to walk on without being required to stick to the footpaths. I believe Scotland has much more extensive right to roam laws than we do here in England, but we'll make the most of the access land we've got today. I should note, just because it's generally open access doesn't mean that access cannot be restricted. For example, there might be restrictions on bringing dogs on the land, or it might be temporarily closed for reasons of land management or conservation. I'm not an expert on this, but Natural England's website has a search feature that you can check for published closures if you think it's going to affect one of your hikes. This area, for example, does have a restriction on dogs to prevent disturbance to grouse. You might have spotted some big rocks back there as well. Those are the so-called hanging stones, which are often cited as the geographic centre of Great Britain. Or at least they're within a few hundred metres of that point. And at this point, we're going to start taking full advantage of that access land right to roam, and we're heading out across the moors, heading roughly in the direction of Cabin Hill to bring us back towards the Trough. There is a permitted footpath from Cabin Hill back to the Trough shown on my OS map, but it didn't feature on the other maps that I use, like OpenStreetMap or the Topo Active maps that the app Outdoor Active uses. When you get there, it might be pretty difficult to distinguish it from the rest of the long grass, but you will occasionally pass posts that mark it as a permitted footpath. Or at least I presume that's what the posts are for. The sign had completely faded off them, but it looks like footpath markings. I think it'd be pretty difficult to navigate out here if visibility was bad. It was really easy for me today because I just shot a bearing to something in the distance. The visibility was really, really good, so even without the footpath, it wasn't hard to find my way. But in bad weather with low visibility, I can imagine this being a pretty awful route to choose. The ground was pretty boggy underfoot, even though it was a dry day. There's little in the way of close landmarks to navigate based on, and spotting the few tracks can be difficult. Plus, there's various water sources in the area that you might have to ford. It wasn't so difficult for me today, but in inclement weather, that could pose a challenge. You will spot, as I say, the occasional post marking a permitted footpath, though, so you could keep an eye out for those at least. The bigger challenges out here are likely to be navigation, with it being difficult underfoot, but also I could imagine weather playing a major factor on most days. Thankfully, I had blue skies and gentle winds, so I got off easy. We're heading back to the Trough now, though, and honestly, after many kilometres across the open moors, I was really happy to be back on a proper footpath. But that's another fell ticked off, and it's home time for me.